Genesis Peorage, Glinda Orgasm, Tony Arena. You guys want chairs?
Nah.
So, I guess they don't really, nobody really needs to speak Dutch. Michael Bourne is a writer for Maximum Rock and Roll and in the band Artless. And Tony Arena had an amazing zine called Anonymous Boy, and also made the animated film, the cutout film that you see, Green Pubes. And Penny Arcade is a legendary performance artist in New York, obviously since being Warhol Superstar, did numerous productions that I was a big fan of, and you see her in the film doing bitch dyke fag hack hope.
Great. So, well, thank you for that visually lovely film. It was really, I love the animation. It was a well done piece in general. Okay, so I want to
Genesis, are you coming up?
No.
Just checking.
Okay. I guess I'll open up with a question that I had. Is homocore over, or has it evolved into something else?
Yeah, I kept to the film more of a historic view. There's still a lot of queercore bands and riot girl bands, but I didn't want to historicize them, and I wanted to let them kind of have space to breathe without being historicized. But it's interesting the kind of directions it's gone. I saw actually, I don't know, it was The Guardian or The Independent, but it was like, recently it was like, the top 10 queercore bands in London you need to know. And I was like, there's 10 queercore bands in London? But it's, when are they playing? What are they playing? Yeah, there's people playing with really similar sound, really same sound. But there's queer activists, I meant, like queer hacktivists. There's like a queer hacktivist collective in Berlin that I met that were influenced by queercore. There was the queer hip hop movement that sprung up from it. I just did a conference in Frankfurt 3 days ago with Mickey Blanco and Cakes Tequila, and Mickey and I grew up together in Chicago, and he was like, yeah, Riot Girl. He's like, Riot Girl and queercore was like, that's where I got the idea from Mickey Blanco. That's how we got ours started. So that kind of media hype around them, and like Leaf and Zebra Cats and all them. So that I would say sprung up also from queercore. Cody from Shun, who's in the audience, who did our credit sequence. That's also, I remember as a teenager, like being in Lawrence, Kansas, watching like Shun play like punk, like dirty gay punk songs in little punk house basements before they changed the sound. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing to me that that you're saying that there's this, homocore, queercore thing happening in the world, because like it's not really happening in New York, and the whole queer scene is like, political correctness. It's so totally the opposite. The queer scene that I'm experiencing, 50 years later of still being in the same scene I was in when I was 17, is so so politically correct, so horrible. God, so fucking horrible. I mean, it would be amazing if there would be this incredible queer explosion of against all this PC language police, everything that's going on. And I thought it was so interesting for me, I guess because of my age. I mean, I was very involved in Riot Girl, and I was like 42, 44. I was like way older, and I was in almost all of the Riot Girl places. I did LA, I did San Francisco, I was at Olympia, I was in Glasgow, in New York, and it was really sad the way that died, and it died the way feminism always dies, because of the way women betray each other, you know. And when I was hearing that girl from Drench, whatever she's saying, and she's saying queer at the edges, that's not my experience. My experience was it was queer at the foundation, you know. So.
Well, do you think that there's still, you say the scene has disappeared a bit from New York, do you feel like the need is as great as it was perhaps 30 years ago? Or do you feel like there's more acceptance for queer lifestyles?
I don't think that's the issue. I mean, the issue is that we're rolling towards totalitarianism, that the entire world is going to the right wing, and that everything that punk, not so much in New York. I mean, to me, punk in New York in the 70s was never political. It was a bunch of people trying to get a record deal. Am I right, Jim?
Well,
No.
Never mind. No, a lot of it was. A lot of it was.
the stimulators. Think of the stimulators. They weren't trying to
Right,
get...
not the stimulators, but the Ramones and everybody else. You
Oh,
know.
yeah.
But Jane County, no. I mean, Jane County is every bit as radical as she ever was, you know. But, anyways,
No, there were
you
these
say.
groups from the streets in the 70s and the 80s. Anybody who could pick up a guitar, picked up a guitar
That's right.
and made a band. And it wasn't...
But does that make it political? I
no,
mean,
it wasn't political, but it wasn't just trying to get a record label.
no, but a lot of
It was
people.
kind of,
Okay,
it was anti-political. The best of it was anti-political. And now politics is too much. The reason there's no queercore, or the reason it's dying, is because humor is dying.
Right.
And because it's sort of what you said before, there's the speech police, and also their sex has become bad.
Right.
So, you know, you can have a horrible politician in Alabama who wants to deport Muslims and everything, and nobody cares, but just talk about, 40 years ago, he touched some girl.
I think,
Then it became bad.
I think
Yes.
what the revolution did was made it okay for you to be queercore wherever the hell you are. I feel like, there's no queercore scene. I'm the queercore scene wherever I am. And that's how what I feel this very empowering movement did for lots and lots of people. And I hope that's what all movements do.
But it's interesting that in 1992, 93, no, let's see, when was it? 92, 93, 94, when the whole Riot Girl thing was happening, and Pansy Division and all of that, that was totally infiltrating all the universities, and all the kids were getting radicalized. That's not possible right now in the current culture that's going on. In a world of microaggressions, in a world of trigger warnings, you can't have a queer punk rock and roll. I mean, this, and maybe this film will, huh? What's not true? You're going to tell me it's not true that we're living in a world of trigger warnings?
Yeah, we are. We definitely are.
Okay, we'll have, can you,
No, wait a minute.
hold on, let's...
Just
we'll-
a second. I want to know
this
what he
is a few-
said. We should know what he said.
Okay, but we have to have a little order here. We're going to
What that
finish
is
up.
order.
No order, no order, no order.
What I'm saying is I'm hoping that this film, Yoni, will inspire people to do that there be a backlash against the language police, you know, a backlash to make it possible again for the kind of freedoms that people are
But I
talking
think
about.
there is. I think now there is a backlash again growing against it. At least I've noticed in the last couple of years. But Tony, I unfortunately got cut from the film.
Oh yeah,
But
he did this whole long interview with me,
You
and
have-
there's none of it in this movie. But you did show little snippets of my artwork all throughout the film, which I appreciate.
And it's
But I was wondering if you could
And,
just...
and footage that I shot of Artless and Cypher in the Snow and Behead the Prophet, some really important bands. Thank you for putting that in. I was very
But I
happy.
wanted to, maybe you could share the story. You had a really moving story briefly about how you got involved with QUEERCORE. About if you like could, I was really moved by the story. I couldn't include it in the film, so maybe you could do a little, your story about how you got involved.
Okay, well, G.B. Jones and Bruce LaBruce, as you know, made that fanzine. JD's. And I used to, punk rock was my life, man. So I would like buy all the punk rock fanzines, and I made my own punk rock fanzines, but I never was out of the closet. And then when I saw a review in a Flipside fanzine that said, JD's a punk rock zine for gays. I think that's all it said. And I was like, ooh, there's a punk rock zine for gays. So I traded them with my zine. I sent my zine, which was called Violin Outbreak. I traded it for their zine because, a lot of punks are real poor, right? We do things on the cheap in every way. Like if you want to make a fanzine, you don't really go to the copy machine shop and say, hey, here's all this money, make 100 copies of my zine. You like sneak at night and make photocopies at work and stuff like that, and that's how I was making my zines. So I sent away for it by sending them my zine and say, please send me yours. And it was like, oh, it's the best. It's the best thing I ever saw. It was very exciting. And so I started drawing like all my like gay punk rock fantasies, and they published it in the zine, but I was still in the closet, not quite ready to come out yet. I was like dipping my toe in, but not quite ready. So I said, oh, just publish this anonymously. So they published under one of my drawings, they were from an anonymous boy. And I said, that'll be my name. And from then on, I became Anonymous Boy. That was like my art name. Like Tom of Finland had an art name. That was my art name. Is that the story you mean?
Well, also, you also tell a story about like how difficult it was and that your dad tried to kill.
Oh, you wanted me to tell that story?
That's a really sad story.
Well, you said it saved your life. You said that like you ran away and they had that crazy chased you in a car.
Well, yeah, when you have homophobic parents, it's very, very hard, right? And to me, I was out on Long Island, right? So I was hearing about all this cool stuff in Manhattan and stuff like that was happening. But to me, it might as well have been on Mars. It was so far away for a teenage kid in the suburbs. You knew it was a train ride away, but you didn't get to go on that train to where this stuff was happening if you were a timid little gay boy, right? And so finally, I fell in love with someone who, I wish he was here tonight, my husband, Ron, who was also gay and out, and one of the people who was into punk before there even was punk. I mean, he was seeing the Stooges in the 60s, he saw the Dolls, he saw all these bands that are called what you call the proto-punk bands that before punk rock was even punk rock. And, I would just be in awe of hearing all these stories of seeing all these bands, and he never took drugs, so he remembered everything. And that was astonishing. And I just grew closer and closer to him. And finally I said, I want to be out. I want to live a gay life. And when I told, my parents, my mother burst into tears. My father was enraged. I got in a car that I borrowed from my friend. And I said to Ron, let's go. I said, there's no talking to them. They're crazy. And little did I know, my father had jumped in the car behind us and was chasing us, literally chasing us, and then trying to run us off the road. So it was, it's like, what do you do when your father is trying to kill you, but panic? And so we were just trying to be very calm. He cut us off the road. He started banging on the car window, saying, open this door, I'll kill you, you faggot. Stuff, really nasty stuff. I don't know where else to go with this other than we.
Tell us where your band is playing on Friday.
Oh yeah, I have a band. We're playing at Hank's Saloon on Friday. I don't know why that's. But thank you. Yeah, I mean, I what I'm trying to say, I hope, is that even through the most horrible adversity that you can imagine, when you're rejected by your family, when you're rejected by society, when the president of the United fucking States is a fascist pig.
And a predator.
You have to be who you are. And that's what I try to be every day. In spite of all this shit. And she's absolutely right. It's absolutely shit what's happening. But you can't, all of the great people that you admire so much are all people who fought back in their own way. And, you know, that's what we all have to do in the face of such atrocities that are going on.
That's right.
Hail,
I
hail.
hope that's what you wanted me to say. I don't know.
No, that was great.
Okay, thanks.
And yeah, this film was absolutely about fighting back, and also about, you know, the life-saving power of finding your people. You know, several people there spoke about how this movement saved their lives, you know, and also gave birth to a music, you know, a music genre. So in addition to the LGBTQ aspect of your film, is the music, you know. So have you positioned it as a music doc? Are you doing music?
It's more than that.
Yeah, somehow I didn't ever even think it would be programmed as a music documentary, but it is. Yeah, I didn't ever picture it as a music documentary. No, as more as a political documentary.
Yeah, but some of the themes are universal, and you know, music is part of it. I'm going to open it up to some questions or comments from the audience.
You know, Penny's right, but she's also wrong. Penny's right, but she's also wrong, because there is still this infectious viral resistance, which is the essence of punk and queer and homocore punk. You look at Christine,
True.
or you look at what's happening in Chicago, which is a scene that was left out of the film, which has been as vital as the other scenes. This is all over the country. Resistance is alive, and it's got a punk beat. And I think that we should be positive about it, because everything is so fucking negative all around us with the bullshit that we have to listen to on the television, on the radio. It's when you go to see Tony's band, Anonymous Boy, at Hank's, or when we all get together. I'm a fucking old man. I go back a long time. But I have to tell you, I knew every band in this film. I'd seen every band in this film. I know Bruce, G.B. Jones, and the message that they teach us is that we do it together. We stop all this separation bullshit. It doesn't serve anything but to divide us. Punk rock is about community.
Well done, Jim Corrat.
Hey, can I piss in your face?
Anyone else? Any other comments?
Later, darling.
Okay. Don't argue with Penny. Don't argue with Penny or I'll hit you. Because I'm stronger than you.
Oh, you and Penny?
Just also having the fire in
She
my
knows that.
belly,
She knows.
get stoked by the film, and just thinking about all my friends I love so dear who've gone through so much and who perform in bands as a way to collaborate and express and live. This is a way of life. It's not dead. I mean, and I just want to talk to the division in language that was spoke about briefly. You know, I just feel like people fought really hard. You fought really hard. People are fighting really hard now for power in language. So I think sometimes it seems divisive when we're talking about, you're saying super politically correct. I think people are trying to claim fluidity, and sometimes the way to do that is to push back on established language. And so I think there's a fine line between, like, trigger warning and shielding people and creating safe spaces so people can create new language that talks about who they are in relation to what has been. And I just really want to say that because the people I love the dearest are going through this every day and creating and gaining ground for all of us, I feel.
I've been going through it for, let's see, I'm going to be 68 this year, and I'm still living the same life I was living when I was 17, and I'll say one thing. You can't call yourself fierce and ask for safe space in the same sentence.
Yeah, just to talk a little bit about generations that I've known. It's interesting, you know, there was a study that came out in 2015 that said, I think 60% of people in Northern Europe wouldn't call themselves heterosexual, and something like 45% of people under 23 in the US wouldn't define themselves as heterosexual, and like 60% knew a gender fluid person. And then there was another study, the largest sex study that since the Kinsey scale that tested the iris levels, found that nearly everybody is on the fluid scale of bisexual, and homosexuality and heterosexuality are choices.
Too much academia.
What I'm trying to say is that young people I meet people who are 18 and have never had any oppression being a queer person. They don't understand why go to a gay bar. They don't understand that there was any kind of oppression involved. Why go to a gay bar? Why call yourself queer? Like, you have sex with a guy, you have sex with a girl, it doesn't matter. And then you have people, you know, like, I go to a lot of countries with this film where it's still, like, really dangerous. Like, I was just in Brazil with this film 3 weeks ago, hanging out with translators, and like, well, our average lifespan is 35 years here, you know, like, so there's like a separation between those communities, and I think, like, this is a big political kind of conversation, but like trying to bring those two groups together, like you said, is really important, and it's difficult, and that's, I think, where this disparity comes from. Yeah, but like, it's really important to have a safe space. Like, people, like, those women in Brazil need to be able to live and survive, but when, like, an academic person that has never been oppressed and decides that they're gay at 21 and wants to be included in the oppression and doesn't want to hear someone's perspective that's not theirs, and uses the word safe space to oppress other people in their group, I think that's what kind of Penny is talking about, and it's so dangerous. Where it should be applied to those girls that I was hanging out with 3 weeks ago, it's instead being used so a bunch of queer people can fight each other in a university classroom.
Anyone else?
I still want to know what that guy up there was saying, that he got silenced and...
Or you? Okay.
Look, I didn't mean to, start a whole thing, and I certainly didn't mean to hijack the whole discussion. I love the film. I think it's wonderful, and it filled me with a lot of inspiring moments. I guess what I just objected to is saying that, Penny, there are tons of bands that I would label under queercore, and I feel like for you to go and say that these things aren't happening in New York is totally wrong. I mean, you're not going out to shows every night to see bands, you know?
You're right. But what I think I was really actually trying to say was not about, I was talking more about the audience than I was talking about the artists. Because I go all over the world. I tour. I've been touring nonstop now for 2.5 years. I've done like 190 or 200 shows in 32 cities around the world, and I'm dealing all the time with university audiences who are fucking freaking out at any kind of
I totally understand that,
and that's what I was talking about. I take it back. I'm not talking about the performers. I'm sure there are a lot of performers. I don't know a lot of them, but I was really talking about the audiences out there in that culture of microaggression, that culture of trigger warnings that is stopping coalition. We're not forming coalitions with each other the way the right wing is endlessly forming coalitions with each other.
Totally.
But thanks.
Yeah.
Can I say something? I'm not used to being the quiet one, so I just wanted to say that I'm in this old group, and I've known Jim for longer than you've been alive, and but I don't feel that the same difference that you. But I started that way by saying the most important thing to me is I'm not gay. I don't like gay things. I think gay things are normal. Gay wants to get married. Gay wants to
be in the army.
Yeah, gay wants to be in the army and join the military. And I really hate this quest for normality. And I think that a lot of what we saw was against that quest for normality. And I don't think it's so important who you fuck. I think it's important that what's in your mind is important. And I completely agree with Penny, though. What's happening is this loss of humor and this divisiveness, saying that you're either with us or against us, and if you have this opinion, then you must feel this and this and this, and you're the enemy. And I don't know if there's a way to get out of it, but I think people have to listen more, maybe, and be the quiet one.
That's one of the great things in the film. I think that keeps coming across over and over and over. Like the great Jack Smith, the great artist Jack Smith, he didn't divide people into gay and straight. He divided people into flaming creatures and pasty normals, you know? And I think that that's a message that comes through very much in the film, you know, and that whole thing of like unity and, you know, being willing to fight the machine.
I don't even care about fighting. I want to just be able to talk.
Yeah.
But you can't even talk anymore because people don't want to listen, and people, oh, you said that word, you said this word, and you said she instead of
So what you do is you talk
she,
anyway. You just talk anyway, right? Whether they like it or not, you just talk anyway.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if you talk and there's nobody there to listen, or if they're only there to give their point of view.
A person is raising their hand.
Yeah, I wasn't there, and I feel...
You're getting a mic now.
Thank you. I feel like really grateful for this film, and I learned a lot of things from it. I also felt like really struck by how overwhelmingly white it was. And so like, I hear you on the like, sometimes, yes, academic language gets really, really intense, and like you feel like it does silence people, right? And it's like, sometimes it's used in ways that people don't understand the context. I also think that like, we didn't really hear from folks of color who were participating in that scene in this film, and I feel like like, you know, we didn't hear from them. I imagine it probably was uncomfortable in like being in spaces like that. Again, I'm white, like I don't know, right? But I'm saying like sometimes even within scenes when we're trying to like bring a community to the forefront and say like we're queer, right? And like fuck everything, we're gonna like be ourselves, we're gonna be here, we're gonna be loud. That we also have to be thinking about who is marginalized within that. I just think that's a really real thing. So I just wanted to name it because it felt strange to me in terms of like...
I don't know, I saw a lot of black people in that film.
I saw them, I just didn't hear from them.
Yeah, I guess you didn't interview everybody. Well, you didn't interview me.
You got to interview me cut out.
Hey, just to speak, I guess, a little bit to the last point, and also to just kind of the queer core, what you could consider that scene now. I think when you were talking about talking to Mickey and to Cakes, like, I would consider that scene punk as fuck. And it definitely is a contemporary scene. It's a scene that's really focused in people of color. It's a scene that's really focused in the queer community, and it is really, really community-based. And if you go to, like, you know, House of Vogue with Mike Q or anything like that, it does have that same sense of community and of, like, you know, it is a safe space for people, but they are, like, definitely super fierce. And I don't think that those things are, like, diametrically opposed at all. But in terms of a contemporary continuation of that queer core concept, I don't think that it has to be rooted in punk rock. I think that it can be that dance scene.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment, and I agree with them. I agree with you 100%. It's interesting because disco was a lot more people of color, a lot more gender bending than what punk had turned into. So it's nice that after that, when the initial queer hip hop movement came in, and we saw like Scream Club or Catastrophe or like all of those guys, it was a really white response. But then, yeah, when like Vicky Blanco, Leaf, Zebra Cats, and all of them came, it was really refreshing and kind of a great thing that I was happy that it came. And I agree with you 100%. It is punk as fuck, and it's the same energy and spirit. And Nikki and I were just talking to a bunch of university kids 3 days ago. So yeah.
You know, we shouldn't really hold on to this idea of what queercore or homocore is, it's not just about punk. M. Lamar is about the most queer punk person that I know, and his music, you know, I'm your auntie homo. Anyone young here wants to talk to an old queen who's been around for a while, I'm your auntie homo who's here for you, and any tranny in the room, I'll say that name with you, and anyone who wants to object to me say tranny. I was told by Lady Bunny it was okay, okay? I mean, these are the kinds of things we have to say to each other.
Okay, I think we have time for one more
The right to be different. The right to be different is what can unify us.
For those of you who don't know who Jim Perad is, he is one of 6 people who started the gay liberation movement right after Stonewall. He's also a person who created so many rock and roll clubs. He was a wrestler in the Mod Squad. And he was part of Yippie. And he was an out queer in 1968, forming Yippie with Abby Hoffman and Rubin and all those guys. So it's important to know who's in the room.
Okay, so a big part of the film was zine culture, and now we exist in a world that has a lot of technology and internet that is easily accessible to people to create platforms for themselves to spread ideas. So how do you see that trend in technology, sociology, psychology transferring